Hey, hey. There are gigantic issues with the government's case against James Comey. Oh my God. Like brand new legal territory. If you're a nerd, it's probably interesting. If you're a decent fucking human, you can see the bullshit involved here. Just depends on which way you want to look at it here. As soon as I heard they had requested the grand jury stuff, I was like, that never happens, right? You very, 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 very rarely do you get the grand jury transcripts and stuff for your case. Like if you're the defendant, and the judge is like, I think he deserves them. This is kind of unprecedented. This is wild. We're gonna have to give them to him. The Comey stuff is wild. And we all know it's literally Trump put that Lindsay Halligan bimbo in there and it's like, go get him. I already fired the other guy because he wouldn't go get him. Now it's your turn. Insurance attorney. Shit's crazy, dude. I've also been trying to find a leaf vacuum for like a month on a good sale, so that's how old I am today. Old enough to where I'm looking for lawn attachments in my spare time. I found such a good deal on one today. And was talking to the guy, and I was like, hey, when can we come? We'll take it, right? If everything's what you say it is in the ad, we'll take it. Or your asking price. When can we come look at it? Then like 30 minutes later, he blocked me and marked it as sold. So he either sold it to somebody else and just didn't want to tell me, or maybe it was too cheap. He realized that he's going to list it for more now. I don't know.
Think what you think about when you're born into a fire. Let them burn it out. Sell them to the richest buyer. They want to let the world decay. They tell us lies and fade away, fade away. We feel betrayed. We were raised.
Oh, I'm sorry, Autumn. The James Comey indictment is complete and utter bullshit. I think it's probably going to get thrown completely out. Technically, there isn't a legal indictment against James Comey right now. There is not a valid legal indictment against James Comey. It doesn't exist. Closing a bunch of these damn windows here. Oh, and John, our fighter John, his page got banned. I'm sorry you're in so much pain. I hope you get to feeling better, honestly. But apparently, someone reached out to help him in like training him and maybe being his manager and promoter, because if nothing else, John has done a good job of getting people's attention, even if you hate him. And the last I heard, he had shared like that person's kids on social media, and that guy's pissed, and then his account was banned. So I don't know. I'm gonna pull that video up while the intro's playing. So give me a second. Hold on just a second. I'll stop the music and get ready to play the intro, but let me find this video while we're sitting on this screen so it won't take me so long while I'm actually doing the show. So give me just a second. About the guy that he shared, I guess, his children in a video. And then I went looking for John's account, but John's account has been taken down. And I don't know if it's because he shared these kids and said something negative about them, but I would have to assume, right? That's got to be the reason. I don't know why else his account would be taken down. Yeah, he talks a lot of shit or whatever, but that's not a reason to lose your account. I remember the guy who made the video was like, oh, there it is. Okay, I got it. All right, share that to me, and we'll do some more lighthearted stuff first, some funny stuff. And then we'll get into James Comey indictment because it's pretty deep in the reading, if you know what I mean. All right, so let's roll the intro. Oh, I forgot to post this. Post that. Did I post it on Discord? Yeah. Okay, here we go.
Hey daddies, it's me, the Linda Binda from TikTok. I wanted to make this video because I wanted to thank you for watching Cold Beer Confessionals.
It's cracking down on people on the left, for sure.
I think that's just incredible. I've watched a few episodes and I'm just like very intrigued. But you know what I'm most intrigued in is Big Daddy's
oh,
meat
your
stick.
throat during.
I heard that it's
that's
very
bad.
thick,
Yeah.
like a good old German sausage. You know, Linda and her coochie loves that. Oh, never mind. Let's not go there. Anyways, I hope you have a good show and enjoy it as you can. There's a lot of weird things that go on, especially when it comes from the realm of Linda Bindaland. So, enjoy the show. Thanks for watching. Peace out.
Welcome, everybody. I am Will Bird, and this is a Cold Beer Confessional. I'm sorry. I know that sucks when they have that tube down your throat, and then they, you know, even when they do like a perfect job, it's pretty fucking sore and horrible afterwards, right? So when they do not such a perfect job, I can imagine how bad it must be, and you can't eat. That's awful. And I don't guess there's anything for it. What do they tell you to do? Gargle salt water or something like that? I guess there's nothing to. Yeah, I guess there's nothing to do for that irritation and throat pain, but I assume it could be pretty bad. I'm sorry, that sucks. All right, guys. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Will Bird. This is the Cold Beer Confessional. We're going to go into the James Comey stuff, but it's a little technical, in-depth. We're going to be reading some court documents, and it is insane. Like, technically and legally, currently, there is no legal valid indictment of James Comey. And the reason I think that's a thing is because there's this mentality that prosecutors have around Trump. Like if you lose or give the impression that you lost in some way and you're a prosecutor for Trump or an attorney or whatever, you're fucking done, right? You're fired. You're out of here. And we'll talk more about it. But basically, this Lindsay Halligan bitch had a grand jury indictment, okay, with 3 charges. It seems like the grand jury said no to 1 and said yes to 2. And even those 2 yeses are in question now because the way that she decided to describe the law around these issues, they said no to 1 and yes to 2. And instead of just taking that as yeah, we got the indictment, she swapped out the fucking paperwork and removed the number 1 charge, gave them new paperwork without briefing them, without talking to them, without redoing the grand jury part, and said, "Oh, well, since you only returned these two, just sign this one too." So now there's two documents, one real indictment, one indictment she just printed up during her lunch break. And the one real indictment is signed, but that's not the one the court accepted because that's not the one she turned in. She turned in the one that she just printed off on her fucking lunch break. It's crazy. It's unprecedented legal territory. This has never fucking happened before, ever. And that may not even be the biggest issue. She lied to them about James Comey's constitutionally protected rights when she gave the grand jury their instructions. She also had the grand jury voting, I guess, on. She set them up as if, like, this is the only evidence we can give you, but we got better evidence we'll bring to trial. Trust me. Like, it's just crazy. But before we go there, because it's a lot of reading, let's check out some videos that maybe it'll be funnier. I saw that Gen X shared this one. They cannot, will not, never will admit that prices are still high, right? They need everything she did is on purpose because she's a dumb bitch. She's an insurance attorney. Then she was Trump's attorney, and now she's the lead prosecutor. Like, now she's a U.S. attorney in Virginia. Like, it's just wild. But check this out. This is your boy that says, if I buy a candy bar for $1 and then tomorrow it's $1.10, did I pay the tariff? No. Yeah, you did, because it was 10 cents. But anyways, here we go.
Now, inflation is still 3%. It's still too high. Now, oil prices, energy prices, there are...
All right, listen. Here's what MAGA doesn't understand. You can say inflation's lower, and that would be technically true. If inflation's 3% and it was 9%, inflation's lower. But you can't say things are getting cheaper, because that 9% is already in the books, and we're adding 3 on top of it. That's a total of 12% versus 2 years ago. And they just will not admit it. I think because every time they do, right, they probably get a fucking lashing from Stephen Miller or whoever's in charge of Donald Trump's fucking dementia care. But they will not admit it. This is the second show clip I've seen of him doing this.
Now, inflation is still 3%. It's still too high. Now, oil prices, energy prices, there are certain things where they have come down. But when you keep saying prices are falling, that's not true, because inflation is still, the 3% is on top of all the inflation we had during the Biden years. So we got all that inflation plus an additional 3%. And we should, I think you should admit that.
I think you should admit that. Will he admit it? Hell no.
A more precise way to say it, though, Joe, is that purchasing power has gone up. So real wages...
We always want inflation usually at 2%.
That's W divided by P for our technical people of the audience, have gone up by about $1,200 this year. So the way to think about it is that we've dug a $3,000 hole because of Biden policies, and we've gained $1,200 on the way out already, which should give you a great deal of hope for the future.
But that's still, you have to admit, prices are higher. Even if we had a $3,000 hole and we got $1,200 of that $3,000 back, we're still in the hole. You guys will not admit it. I don't know why.
Wage increases that we're seeing will continue, and even if inflation stays positive, make it so that people feel way better when they go to the grocery store and to buy a car. We've reduced the cost of buying a car with the deductibility of interest. I mean, there's a million things that we're doing to fix this problem, but it's just kind of astonishing to me that the cost problem is somehow being blamed on us. Now,
I don't know if it's being blamed on you as much as... why are you trying to gaslight us and tell us that everything's cheaper? It's just not. It's not. Very few things are, right? Egg prices went down due to the bird flu and bird population coming back up and shit. We can admit that, right? Gas prices are down a little bit. They're not below $2, which we keep lying about, or even close to $2. I think I paid $2.60 last night when I filled up, and we usually have pretty low gas prices where I live. But to keep saying, like, they're right at $2 or below $2 in 5 states, why are we lying? Hold on, I'll show you another one. Let's see. I'm sure somebody's posted the video. Coffee's up 26%, groceries are up 55%, electricity's up 15%, car prices are at record highs, housing costs are at record highs, the job market is at the lowest level in decades, health insurance premiums are about to double. Stop gaslighting us. Let's see.
But we could be hitting close to $2 a gallon. I'd love to break it if we could, but
no, we're not. On average, we're not even close. And even in individual states like where I live, where it's cheap, no, we're not. We're not at $2 a gallon.
we could be, and you know, when that comes down, everything else has been coming down. Groceries are down. The price of things are down. But we could be hitting close to.
This isn't actually the clip I'm looking for, but give me just a second. I'll show it to you.
But we could be, and you know, when that comes down, everything else has been coming down. Groceries are down. The price of things are down. But we could be hitting close to $2 a gallon. I'd love to break it if we.
Sorry, let me pause him. I know he's just going to keep talking over and over again. There's another interview with the same guy. What's the guy's name? Kevin Hassett or whatever. There's another interview with him where, like, the guy's trying to fucking corner him on it, and he just will not. He will not say it. He's like, well, what about eggs? Eggs are down. Yes, but we're not talking just about eggs. If we only bought eggs every day, that would be amazing. I'll find it over here on my side as well. Marjorie Taylor Greene interview. Where's the interview? Prices are rising. Wages are not. Oh, that's from 2024. But same thing's going on right now. That was the Biden administration one. Like, they just want to keep pushing back to Biden. Biden's inflation's already locked in the books. We're already there. So if your inflation is 3 or 4%, that goes on top of whatever Biden had. Yes, it's an improvement. Yes, it's the right direction. It's not lowering prices. And you can't keep pretending it is. Sorry, let me find this clip. Oh, it's another one of that. Maybe it's an extension of that clip. Copy link, send that to myself. Sorry, I got it. Maybe it's the same interview, but asked in a different way. I'm still looking, but here's one.
It's still too high. Now, oil prices, energy prices, there are certain things where they have come down, but when you keep saying prices are falling, that's not true because inflation is still, the 3% is on top of all the inflation we had.
Here's the one I'm looking for.
So we got all that inflation plus an additional 3%. And we should, I think you should admit that.
A more precise way to say it, though.
That's the one we just watched, right? And then there's this one. Also today, or yesterday.
Still a mighty large deficit. So the president claims that Thanksgiving costs are down 25%. I mean, does he know that's not true?
Well, if you look at Walmart and the few places that put out their prices of Thanksgiving baskets.
Now Walmart lied. Well, I can't blame Walmart. Walmart's just doing marketing, right? They're trying to say, hey, you're going to save money this Thanksgiving because last Thanksgiving they were telling people don't buy turkey and shit. They're like, you're going to save money this Thanksgiving. So they put a bunch of off-brand shit. They have less prepared dishes as well as less ingredients. There's a lot more generic stuff than there ever was on the last list.
I got to stop because the Walmart comparison's like not a thing. I mean, Walmart had a Thanksgiving package last year.
But Walmart's doing it for marketing to get more people to buy more things for Thanksgiving dinner. Trump's using it for political reasons and lying about it.
They've got a Thanksgiving package this year. The one this year contains much less than what the one last year.
Total products, 15 versus 21. Total units, 22 versus 29. Generic brand 60% this year and is only 45% last year.
So that's why the price is less. Look, we got a chart here. Last year, it was 21 total products. This year, it's 15. Total number of items in those products was 29% now. 29, now it's 22. There's more generic brand stuff. So, I mean, Thanksgiving, if you're going to the store to buy groceries for Thanksgiving, it's going to be more expensive this year.
I really don't understand where you're going in the sense that Joe Biden gave us 20%
He's not
inflation.
president. Donald Trump's president.
No, and you want us to fix the hole that Joe Biden
I'm
dug
saying,
right away.
why does the president tell
the prices went up so much under Joe Biden, and inflation is way down. Inflation is about half what it was in December.
Just say prices are still up on a lot of things, and we're going to work on it. Like, I don't know why it's like this nail in the coffin that they just can't admit. Probably because Donald Trump's literally going everywhere telling people that prices are at record lows because he doesn't understand shopping, right? He doesn't understand prices. Remember when he thought he brought back the word groceries that hadn't been used since like the Middle Ages? Like, he doesn't understand these things.
The prices went up so much under Joe Biden, and inflation is way down. Inflation is about half what it was in December. This is something that's being fixed fast, and real incomes are up after dropping about $3,000 under Joe Biden. And so, sure, you can find a few things where the price is higher, but there's a whole bunch of stuff where the price is lower, like gasoline, like mortgage rates.
When are we going to get the Republican plan?
You understand that mortgage rates have gone way down, and it's much cheaper to buy a home now than it was when
because interest rates have come down, right?
Yeah.
So when are we going to hear from the White House the plan?
I don't know why they can't admit it. There's also one more thing I want to show you, which is just wild. Talk about these people misrepresenting a fucking study. That's what I want to type in. Federal study vindicates Trump trade policy. I think this was posted by the White House or someone at the White House. President Trump was right again. Here it is. Rapid Response 47. The White House also shared it. But these are all White House adjacent accounts. Official White House Rapid Response account. And it says, well, I should have just stayed on the post I was on. I lost it now. Anyways, let's go back right here. Federal study vindicates Trump trade policy. 150 years of evidence shows tariffs lower inflation. Now, there's two different statements there, and you can separate those, okay? Federal study vindicates Trump trade policy. So does this federal study say that Trump's trade policy is vindicated? Like, it's a good trade policy. It's good for America. It's good right now, right? And then the second statement is 150 years of evidence shows tariffs lower inflation. I'll go ahead and tell you that second statement is true, okay? Tariffs lower inflation.
Clayton Knight just resubscribed for 28 months. Fox News would be a lot better if it was just news about foxes.
It would. Thank you very much for the resubscription. I appreciate that. Now, tariffs do lower inflation, or it seems to be the trend that they can get from that, okay? But they're not being honest about why, okay? So basically, it's like tariffs lower inflation, the job market fucking sucks, wages go down, unemployment's on the rise, and because you can't afford to go fucking buy anything, well, then prices come down a little bit. Like, if we hold on, I'll show you somebody who went through the study. It'll be easier than me trying to go through the entire study myself. Give me just a second. He actually pulls up this study does not vindicate Trump. It does show that tariffs do lower inflation over time. There's also a thing called tariff shock, but it also lowers the stock market. It also raises unemployment. It also lowers how much you make, right? So by the time we go through all those, and you can't afford to shop at a store anymore, suddenly prices are lower. Yeah, because nobody can afford to fucking buy anything. Just watch this.
There are two problems.
He does a really good job going over this.
This is from White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. She says, Fed study vindicates Trump.
This was Caroline Leavitt sharing it. That's where I should have went and got it. But I got it from Rapid Response 47. Same thing. They all post the same thing. Federal study vindicates Trump trade policy. 150 years of evidence shows tariffs lower inflation.
Trade policy. 150 years of evidence shows tariffs lower inflation. The two problems are one,
I'm gonna steal this.
not vindicate Trump's trade policy. It actually makes tariffs seem pretty bad. The second problem is that the community note is bad. The Fed study actually does say that tariffs are going to reduce inflation. And the community note just says, no, they won't, and then links to a bunch of news articles. Some of these news articles say that tariffs increase inflation. But studies and news articles or studies and different studies can say different things. It doesn't mean you're necessarily wrong. You'd have to actually compare this paper to the arguments here and figure out which arguments are better. This is the paper. They get an average effective tariff rate for 150 years since 1870, and they also find a measure for CPI inflation and
the paper is literally called "What is Tariff Shock?" This is not a pro-Trump trade policy paper. It's called "What is Tariff Shock?" It goes in to find the short-term effects of tariff shocks on macro economies.
employment. They say that Republicans tend to like tariffs and Democrats tend to dislike tariffs. Since the parties are in charge at different times, that means that similar economic conditions will provoke different responses depending on who's in charge in terms of tariff policy. Meaning, if there's a recession going on and a Democrat's in charge, they'll try to lower tariffs. But if there's a recession going on and a Republican's in charge, they'll try to raise tariffs. And so that creates the situation where tariffs are kind of randomly, quasi-randomly applied, depending on who's in charge, even in the same economic circumstances. So the paper's authors argue, we can just check how does inflation change as a response to the quasi-random changes in tariff rates.
There you go, right? So inflation trending down when tariffs are basically trending up, and inflation trending slightly up when tariffs are down.
And that's what they do here.
But if tariffs, let me ask you a question. Let's say some type of new policy is implemented, brand new policy no one's ever thought of before. And what it actually does is cuts your paycheck in half. For real working class Americans, middle class Americans, not upper class, but middle and lower class Americans, it cuts your paycheck in half. That's the effect of this brand new policy. It's meant to do something else, but the actual effect of it is it cuts your bring home paycheck in half. Then you can't afford, you have to live off what, half of what, so you're going to be buying a whole lot less. Right? If what you used to make is now cut in half for the year, you're going to be buying a whole lot less of something, right? Because you have to be. You can't live off half your wages. Now, in response to all of middle class and lower class America buying half of what they used to fucking buy, or roughly that, suddenly all the big corporations are like, well, we're not selling anything. I guess we're going to have to lower prices, right? We're going to have to lower prices. That technically would be a gigantic drop in inflation. But is that for a good reason? If the fact is that you can't afford to feed yourself, so companies were forced to lower prices to sell things, is that a good policy? Of course not. But that's what it shows tariffs do.
Kind of. I say kind of because this isn't really changing tariffs for...
He's got a good quote in here that says, Trump's trade policy is going to hurt the economy, lower GDP growth, hurt stock prices, and increase unemployment. But on the bright side, you'll be so poor that you won't be able to buy anything, and a store might lower their prices as a result. So imagine saying something like, federal study vindicates Trump trade policy, when the actual takeaway from the paper is that it's pretty fucking bad for the economy. And because it's so goddamn bad for the economy, sometimes stores lower their prices. Look at all these different talking heads that just shared the same fucking thing, over and over, including Carolyn Leavitt.
This change in CPI inflation. You'd have to read this note and think about this section if you want to understand what it really is. But, this is the basic idea. The idea is that more tariffs, lower inflation. And likewise, more tariffs, higher unemployment. Basically, what the paper's authors are saying is that tariffs are going to mess up the economy. It's going to destroy asset values, depress economic activity, damage the...
So the paper is basically saying tariffs really fuck our economy up. Overall, yes, there may be a little bit less inflation, but every other number we measure gets fucked. And that's probably why the inflation's a little bit lower. And Trump's team is like, vindicated. This paper from the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco vindicates Trump on his trade policy.
Stock market and GDP growth, people are going to lose their jobs, and employment is going up. And so people aren't going to have money, and they're going to be afraid of spending the money that they do have. And so stores will lower prices because nobody wants to spend money. Let me just show you a few quotes from the paper to substantiate that. Higher tariffs lead to lower economic activity and lower inflation in the short run. Possible explanation relies on the effect of uncertainty. People don't know what's going to happen in the economy. A tariff shock, meaning sudden change in tariffs, creates or coincides with an uncertain...
Like, they could have shared, if they wanted to not be fucking just outright lying about what the paper says, they could have said just the part that says tariffs lower inflation. That's true from this paper, technically. Now the system it uses to lower inflation is really fucked up, right? We can't afford food, so suddenly food has to be cheaper because stores still want to sell the amount of food they have. But to say vindicated, his whole trade policy is vindicated by this study.
Economic environment, which by itself depresses economic activity by lowering consumers' and investors' confidence and puts downward pressures on inflation. So we don't know what's going to happen in the market. We're not going to invest. We're not going to start new businesses or hire people. And that's going to put downward pressure. People are afraid of buying, so prices have to come down on inflation. Another possible channel is a wealth channel, whereby an adverse tariff shock leads to a drop in asset prices, which then depresses aggregate demand and leads to higher unemployment and lower inflation. One thing they look at for asset prices is stock market valuations, an index for stock market performance.
This is the same reason that we don't, someone said in chat earlier, we try to go for a target of 2% inflation. We don't want 0% inflation, because if you get down to 0% inflation or even negative inflation, which could be a thing, right? Technically it could be a thing. It's probably because our market is so fucking bad. Like, the rest of our economy is shit.
Correlated
deflation
in tariffs. They write, a tariff increase lowers stock market valuation and raises stock price volatility. So your assets become less valuable, stock prices go down, stock price volatility meaning how much it's changing, that goes up, that's economic uncertainty. People are afraid of buying stuff. One more quote, a tariff hike lowers inflation and lowers GDP growth. This is when they were looking specifically at France.
A tariff hike lowers inflation and lowers GDP growth.
But they say the results are consistent with the U.S. results. Tariffs are lowering GDP growth. So I wouldn't call that vindicating Trump's trade policy. It's like saying, hey, Trump's trade policy is going to hurt the economy, lower GDP growth, hurt stock prices, increase unemployment. But at least you'll all be so poor that you won't be able to buy very much stuff, and stores might lower their prices as a result.
You'll be so poor that you won't be able to buy anything, and stores may lower their prices, and that'll look good for our inflation numbers. Now, he goes on to say that this community note's also not right, because it says no, tariffs don't reduce inflation. Yes, they do. That's what this study says. And then it cites a bunch of sources saying that, the tariffs don't seem to lower inflation, blah, blah, blah. But that's not the issue. The issue is the misrepresentation of the study. Yes, tariffs are lower. That does not vindicate Trump trade policy. And the reason that inflation is lower is because everything else is fucked when tariffs go in place. That's what 150 years of evidence shows. Not just that tariffs lower inflation in the short run. Fucking idiot. All right. I've also got, I told you I would show you a couple more things. I don't know. Who is this preacher? Do we know this preacher? This just popped up. I don't know what it is.
Income is ungodly. Redistribution of wealth is ungodly. Giving money to people who aren't working is ungodly. When we sent checks to everybody during COVID, it was ungodly. When we just took a bunch of guys who weren't going to pay off their college loans and just gave them money, it was ungodly.
This isn't just false, it's evil and directly contradicts the teachings of the Bible. In ancient Israel, the Israelites were specifically told when farming to not harvest portions of their land so that the poor and foreigners could eat from them.
Yes, the other foreigners, the festivals, they took that and they stored it in the city centers. Then every 2 years they would break it. So it's always on an every other year cycle. They would break it out and feed the poor, the orphans, the people from other lands. They would just give it to them for free and feed them.
See that in Exodus 23:10 through 11, Deuteronomy 24:19 through 22, and Leviticus 19:9 through 10. In Proverbs 14:31, we're told that whoever oppresses a poor man insults his maker, but one who is generous to the needy honors him. In Proverbs 19:17, we're told whoever is generous to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will repay him for his deeds. Jesus says in Matthew 5:42, give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. In Matthew 19:21, Jesus tells the rich ruler to sell his possessions.
I think we're really seeing a separation between real fucking Christians and Christian nationalists from Trump. Like the Christian nationalists are on board or even want to go even further, like the new burn your MAGA hat and get an America First hat, or Matt Walsh saying America First, America Only.
And give them to the poor. But according to this guy, Jesus was apparently
versus real Christians
to do something ungodly. John the Baptist says in Luke 3:11, whoever has 2 tunics is to share with him who has none, and whoever has food is to do likewise. Kind of sounds like some redistributing of wealth, doesn't it? Jesus says that on the day of judgment, he will say to those who are going to hell, depart from me, you.
I just don't think, it's so weird. Like the area I live in, the people I live around, like they're so proud of working hard, like working their fucking ass off, which is good. Like I'm proud when I do a hard day's work, and I used to work on the road, and some of the jobs I've been part of, like I'm proud of that. You can be proud of that, but you also have to realize, look how fucking hard you're working and still barely getting by. In the wealthiest fucking country in the world. People are like, I work fucking 80 hours a week. I've never taken a government handout, and my bank account's still zero when I go buy groceries. That's why you shouldn't have food stamps. No, motherfucker. First of all, food stamps are great. Second of all, you shouldn't have to work all that time and have nothing in the bank.
Cursed into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me.
If you want to keep working that hard, some people like to. I like when I've got something on my mind, I work on shit. I've been rewiring the whole fucking campground office here lately, and it's good to just pass time, and I don't think about stuff. I put my fucking headphones in and just work, and I enjoy working. I like working like that. I liked when I was working on the road and we were working fucking 12, 14, 16-hour shifts, and that's all we did was work, and it had structure to it. Like come in, do my job, go back, shower, eat, and go to bed and wake up and do the next day. But I shouldn't be, if I'm working that way because I want to work that many hours and overtime and bust my ass, I should be getting ahead, right? And the problem is now, like, it doesn't matter how fucking hard you work, you're never getting to that next level. We were sold this dream, like if you work your fucking face off and you stay out of trouble and you do this and do that, and you'll have a house and a family and a picket fence, and you'll be living good, you'll have retirement and you can have toys and stuff. It just isn't that. A lot of people would love to work that hard, can't find jobs, can't get the right jobs, can't get past entry-level jobs, and they need food stamps and stuff. I can work my ass off, and I still can't get ahead.
Naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick, and
I tell you, one of the most depressing things I saw one time was like the statistics. Let me look it up. Of like the minuscule fucking chance you have of jumping basically like an income bracket. Like whatever income bracket you're in, you have like a fucking 90% chance of dying in that. Whatever income bracket you're born in under your parents, you have like a fucking 90% chance of dying in that income bracket. Like it's fucking insane. No matter how hard you work, no matter what you come up, the odds are fucking stacked against you.
in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they also will answer, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or naked or sick or in prison and did not minister to you? Then he will answer them, saying, truly I say to you, as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did not do it to me. And in case you don't know who the least of these are, the drug addicts that you turn your nose up, they are the least of these. Those who are struggling with unemployment and they can't get a job, that's the least of these.
The people you're busy judging are the least of these, that you're commanded to do these things for.
The people that you turn your nose up
as if they were Jesus.
And what Jesus says is what you do to those, you do to him. In Acts 2:44, we're told all who believed were together and had all things in common, and they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. I guess it's a shame the early church didn't have this guy to tell them they were actually acting ungodly. James 2:15-17 says, if a brother or sister is poorly clothed and lacking in daily food, and one of you says to him, go in peace, be warmed and filled, without giving them the things needed for the body, what good is that? So also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. In ancient Israel, every 7th year, everybody was required to forgive all the debts. Yet supposedly, if we forgive student loan debts, apparently that's ungodly? No. Let me tell you what is ungodly, Pastor Mark. What is ungodly is calling yourself a pastor when you're really just a politician who is twisting the Bible into a hammer to beat down the very flock that you're supposed to be tending, just so you can support your downright vile aversion to helping those in need. And according to Jesus himself, this very attitude you're expressing of refusing to help the poor is something that could very well render you liable to hellfire. So why don't you actually follow the Bible that you say you believe in, instead of your political party's talking points? Why don't you actually forgive the debts of the needy, give generously to the poor, and support social policies that would lift people out of poverty? Because that's what Jesus wants you to do.
Damn. Told him to him straight, right? And here's the John video I promised I would show you because, again, I don't know what was going on. So this guy has videos of him like doing MMA stuff and blah, blah, blah. And apparently he's worked with fighters and trained some fighters and stuff. And he reached out to John. He's even got a video saying, look, you may hate John. You may want to troll John. You may hate what he stands for, whatever. But he's getting attention. He's going viral. He's setting up these fights, you know. And this guy basically reached out to him to offer to help him, to manage him, to help him train, to whatever. And I guess John turned on him.
John. I offered a hand of help to you in this business, and you spit it back in my fucking face. And now you're putting up people's children on your videos. Okay, that's a big no-no in the fight world. But John, since you want to accept everybody's challenge, put me on that list.
And I know John knows this. Why? Because when John put up or just said something about Sam Alvey's daughter, people were like, that's too far. You've gone too... No, don't talk about being her new dad because you're going to kill... That's just too far, right? So he knows putting up pictures of people's kids is too far.
Okay, that's a big no-no in the fight world. But John, since you want to accept everybody's challenge, put me on that list. Okay, because I'm going to personally make sure that your journey into this fighting that you're doing is just the hardest time ever. I'm going to get petty.
Oh.
Use all of my resources to make sure this is the hell of a time for you. Remember, you were given a chance. Don't forget that.
He put up Chris Curtis's kid. Hold on, let's see if we can find if anybody saved that post. The guy that's going to fuck him up. He used a picture of his kid and I guess said something. Hold on. I don't know if anybody saved that post. That's what I'm fixing to read to you. I bet you no one saved it. It probably wasn't up for long. John sent him this text message right here, and it says, brother, first off, let me apologize to you. I wasn't thinking when I put a picture of your kid up there. For what it's worth, as a man, I apologize. A childish side came out. I got emotional. You see, I always wanted my dad to tell me he was proud of me. And then Chris Curtis says, you are a waste of space. Your mother dying and your father leaving you is literally just the most expedient way to distance themselves from the meth-ridden embarrassment that they somehow prophetically knew you would become. And yet still, after all this time, you still find creative and hilarious new ways to embarrass yourself and their names and memories. Now, for the very last time, do not message me again. I will see you December 31st. Do not forget your card title. And then the post says, this is the last time I'll address this weirdo. I'll see you December 31st. No more talking, no more attention. Don't forget to bring your title. So apparently John put up a picture of his kid. That can't be good. Damn. I wish I'd have seen it. It had to be this post, I bet. The side you don't ever see. Bear's hands can hurt. Yeah, Bear's hands can heal. He really is the perfect mix of mom and dad. A mix of mom and dad. I guarantee you he used this and said something about his kid. And I know that Chris Curtis told him one time, like, talking shit, was like, yeah, I'm going to finally make your parents proud of you and do something like you said and accept this fight or something like that. And he's saying, well, it was because I always wanted my dad to tell me he was proud of me. And now, so he went after his kid. That can't be good. This guy's going to fuck him up, dude. Or there's another video of his kid. Hold on. There's this one.
I just got up, sorry, a little bit tired, but I forgot to ask you guys about this yesterday. Did you guys?
That's not the right one. How do I get to it?
Chris Eubank, Conor Ben rematch. If you did,
this one. He had to put this one up too. That's his son there. So December 31st, this guy's gonna kill him. This guy's gonna fucking kill him. I can't believe he put that. And again, everybody told him that during the Sam Alvey thing, don't mention his daughter. That's like off. Y'all are just fighting, right? Talk all the shit you want. Don't mention someone's kids, dude. That's how you get dad. Not that I would condone violence, but just in case violence happens, that's how it happens. Anyways, I found we got to have a crazy Christian movie night one day, but I found a couple good ones. I found a movie where this scientist whose wife is like this Christian is working for another scientist. Then they're trying to invent a time machine. And the main scientist is like, tell your wife to stop praying. Every time she does, it messes up our testing because the prayer's messing up the testing. And so then the time machine works and they go back and they get rid of Jesus. Then they come back to the future and everything's like horrible and people are like zombies. So they have to go back in time. They have to go back in time to fix the Jesus thing. And then I can't wait to watch this movie. It's called Black Easter. Black Easter. We're going to watch it one night. And then there's another one I found called, I went on a weird Christian movie thing. There's another one called Jingle Smells, where the crazy leftist liberals decide to cancel Christmas. No toys, no nothing. And then this dump truck driver who's like ultra blue collar Christian guy finds all the toys that were thrown away. All the toys that were thrown away for that were supposed to be for Christmas. So he starts handing them out and they start calling him Jingle Smells and he brings back Christians, or he brings back Christmas and gets rid of this woke no Christmas stuff. So I'm excited about that one too. They are burning their MAGA hats. This is the last video we'll do for the Comey stuff. I'll be right back.
Is officially declaring MAGA is dead.
America first, not MAGA.
MAGA is over for good this time, for real this time. So let's watch here. We got a breakdown for you where he lays out the two sides of the Civil War and why one side has definitively lost. Take a look.
After this year, 2025 is the year that MAGA died. This is the year that this hat is no longer controversial. The hat is not edgy. The hat is not provocative. It doesn't even mean anything. This hat is dead. This hat is dead. Now, metaphorically speaking. And this is the future. And let's look at the ledger.
There's literally
side of MAGA, you have
a trend going on right now where they're burning their MAGA hats after the H-1B visas and the Epstein and the everything, and potentially Donald Trump giving a blowjob to a man and or a horse. They're burning their hats. They're shutting it down, and they're going with America first. So I'll let you watch just a little bit of this, then we'll do the Matt Walsh clip, and then we'll get into the Comey stuff.
Lindsey Graham.
Excuse me.
Ben Shapiro.
True.
Marco Rubio.
True.
Randy Fine.
True.
Mark Levin.
True.
Apparently all of that is MAGA. Together they support war with Iran. Chinese students, H-1B visas. 300,000 deportations all year.
By the way, what he's saying there is that's not enough. He's saying that's an abysmally low number. That's what he's implying there.
And on the other side,
By the way, you forgot somebody. You forgot somebody. The biggest one on that side is Trump. Trump is the biggest one on that side. All right, now let's hear the renegades from within the party.
Apparently, what is not MAGA, what is kicked out of MAGA, wacky, crazy, haters.
I think they realize that. I think Nick Fuentes realized that Trump's a fucking idiot. Like, sometimes he has like a good comeback, or sometimes he says shit that's funny, and he's entertaining to watch. Whether you're watching him because you hate him or you love him, the shit he does gets attention. Just like John, right? Trump is good at getting attention. From me, it's almost always bad attention, but from the people that love him, it's good attention, and it doesn't matter. Attention's attention. But I think Nick Fuentes is smart enough to know that it's the people around Trump that shape the policy.
Republican haters, Democrats, third worldists. You got Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Thomas Massey.
Are they all the same?
I think Ben Shapiro's probably smart. He's just a fucking shill for everything, right? Like, he's got older clips where he was against tariffs, where he was against Trump, where he was against too many deportations. He was against all this stuff. He's not an idiot. He just shills for everything, right? He will shill everything on the right. And I think it all goes back to Ben Shapiro's family was all in the Hollywood business. That's where Ben Shapiro's money and his family comes from, and a lot of that generational wealth. And they were kind of shunned from that. And then he went ultra right-wing MAGA grifter.
What? So Thomas Massey is just a hardcore libertarian, like...
And he's smart enough to come out against Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson and the radicalization of the right, because he's not dumb.
Like Ron Paul. Marjorie Taylor Greene is doing a reverse Fetterman now, where she's actually saying some things that are sort of left-leaning from time to time. She said, I'm sorry that I added to like the hate and increasing the temperature in this country, right? These are not the same. Tucker is not the same as her, and they're not the same as you.
Let me show you. By the way, go watch Kyle's video if you want to. And then Matt Walsh, America Only. America First means America Only. He says that he is an American chauvinist. Is that what he says? I just wanted a clip of him saying it. Maybe better to get it off TikTok, to be honest with you. I think Matt Walsh is maybe literally retarded, to be honest with you.
What we want is for someone to unashamedly and single-mindedly advocate for Americans and Americans only. We want someone to say, you know, the only thing I care about is helping Americans. The only people I care about in the world are Americans.
This right here would be awesome. This would be awesome. Right here would be awesome. If we lived in a vacuum. We don't. America, this is going to sound really fucked up. America doesn't help with problems around the world because we're generous. You'll have politicians say, oh, yeah, it's so bad over there, and these people are starving, and those people don't have water. We don't help because we're generous. We help to keep their problem over there. Imagine you have your own country, and it's just 4 squares, okay? And in the top left square, we have everything we need. Food, water, money, and economy. In the top right square, they have a lesser version of that. Food, enough money, a decent economy. In the bottom 2 squares, which are countries, they don't have food, water, or economy. How long can you expect those people to stay in those fucking squares? You are either retarded or naive if you think people are just going to starve quietly. Their problems will become our problems, and then we can't live like we want to, ignoring these problems like they don't exist. So we're either doing it for political reasons or for pressure, or to do it because someone else won't do it, or to keep them out of our square, our country, our border. We don't want their problems here. Same reason. It's easier to see when you think about like a health outbreak. We want to treat Ebola in Africa because we don't want Ebola in the United States. We want to treat starvation and jobs and food and water in Mexico. Because if we have all those things and they don't have access to them and they can't get to them, how easy is it for them to come here and get ours? And then if they're all coming here and getting ours, well, maybe there's not enough for everybody now. So it's easier to fix their problems in their country and give them access to the stuff they need and get a benefit out of it, right? Maybe we need something back, or maybe we need to put a base there, or maybe we need help with drug cartel or whatever. But we do that not because for no benefit, right?
And single-mindedly advocate for Americans and Americans only. We want someone to say, the only thing I care about is helping Americans. The only people I care about in the world are Americans. And we don't want to just hear that, but
and that's absent of like war and nuclear weapons and missiles and hostages and attacks and world finance and economics and all that other stuff that it's not as easy to see like while we're making some of these decisions when it has to do with like, well, we're doing this so China doesn't put a battery plant here and then we can't get to the minerals to build our batteries and our electric car sector goes on. Like, it's easier to see with something like Ebola.
we want to see the action taken as well. I've seen some people on social media say, hey, it's America first, but not America only. I disagree. I think it is America only. It's like I said months ago, I consider myself an American chauvinist. America first, America only. I'm an American chauvinist. I don't care about it. This is the only thing I care about. America should be the only thing you care about, especially as a leader.
So that's their new flip, and they're really coming after Trump for this type of stuff, especially after his little H-1B visas for the Chinese immigrants or whatever, because he basically said we don't have people that could be engineers here.
Of the country. What we want is for someone to unashamedly and single-mindedly advocate for Americans. What we want.
Yeah. So that's why they're going up against Trump, basically, or they're coming out against Trump, I guess. Did you guys know that the FBI SWAT team in Nashville, Tennessee,
in 1930,
the official FBI SWAT team in Nashville, Tennessee, an elite SWAT team, has been redirected for private security for Kash Patel's girlfriend?
So we've got an MS Now exclusive. It turns out FBI Director Kash Patel's country singer girlfriend is getting a taxpayer-funded security detail. Sources tell my colleague Carol Lenig and I that agents from the FBI's SWAT unit in Nashville have been assigned to protect Alexis Wilkins.
What happens when the Nashville SWAT team gets called out now?
Patel's 27-year-old partner. She lives in Nashville.
They're saying it's because she got threats. Welcome to the fucking internet. Like, I get threats all the time. There's literally an Elvis impersonator that is threatening to come beat me up in a costume.
Experts say this is unprecedented. People familiar with FBI security protocols say the girlfriends of top officials have never received government staff security details. One former agent called this a clear abuse of position and a misuse of government resources. Now, the FBI didn't respond when I asked them for comment, but the Bureau told other news organizations in a statement that Wilkins has the detail because she's been getting credible death threats. Still, we're told that agents in Nashville are concerned that if the SWAT team there gets a call, it won't be fully staffed. All this is happening, of course, as Patel is under fire for other questionable uses of taxpayer resources. Last month, for example, he flew on the FBI's $60 million government Gulfstream jet for what critics called a date night to see Wilkins perform the national anthem at a wrestling event in Pennsylvania. The Wall Street Journal also reported, and we confirmed, that Patel flew on the jet to a luxury hunting retreat in Texas called the Boondoggle Ranch. Now, the FBI director is required by policy to fly on FBI jets when he travels. But the question of how many personal trips he takes comes down to judgment and exactly how he feels about using taxpayer resources for his own amusement.
That's pretty wild. All right. Let's go over this, the Comey indictment that doesn't exist, apparently. So I'm gonna start way up here, probably. There's a lot to read. It is extreme. As soon as I heard this, I was like, what? It is so fucking rare. Our grand jury process is kept secret, right? It has a need to be secret, right? To keep the criminals from knowing what we're investigating, what we're doing, that we're building a case against them. They could destroy evidence. They could do this. They could do that. We don't want people on grand juries doxxed and harassed and blah, blah, blah. Our grand jury system is shrouded in secrecy of the of everything about it. And it is extremely, extremely rare that someone accused of a crime gets access to their grand jury materials. Very exceptionally rare. It almost never happens. In fact, the way the law reads is you have to produce a particularized need that outweighs the need for the secrecy of the grand jury system. And the grand jury system is a staple. It's very rare that you're going to have a need that outweighs the secrecy for the grand jury system. So when I heard this, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I did not expect to see the Comey stuff saying like, oh, well, he needs the grand jury material. And a judge to be like, yeah, I think he does. Right? That's a big deal to get into. So when I saw that, I was like, I got to go find these documents. Now, he hasn't received the material yet because a higher appeals court, basically the government petitioned and said, hey, at least let us file our appeal before he gets all this grand jury material, just in case our appeal. I don't think their appeal is going to work, but we're going to read what they did. And that's not even the worst thing here. The worst thing is the way they manipulated the grand jury. But let's start here. And worked way outside of their legal bounds for attorney-client privilege and the dates mentioned in their own search warrants. But we'll get there. So the media is setting this up as James Comey was just sending all these crazy things. This professor friend that he has, it was his attorney, guys. Okay? The professor that he was emailing back and forth with was his legal attorney through a lot of this. That's why it's subject to attorney-client privilege. He wasn't just randomly emailing a professor at a college and being like, hey, I think this is good. It was his personal attorney. Happened to also be the professor at a college. All right, so here we go. Let me take a drink real quick. In 2017, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia initiated an investigation referred to by the FBI as Arctic Haze. The investigation concerned an allegation of unauthorized disclosure of classified information to a New York Times reporter, which appeared in April 22nd, 2017 article titled, Comey Tried to Shield the FBI from Politics, Then He Shaped an Election. The investigation focused on the article's inclusion of classified information related to one of the factors that influenced Mr. Comey's decision as an FBI director to unilaterally announce the closure of the FBI's investigation into then presidential candidate Hillary Clinton's handling of classified material while she was serving as Secretary of State. Daniel Richman, a Columbia Law School professor, personal friend of Mr. Comey, and former special government employee at the FBI during Mr. Comey's tenure as FBI director, was quoted by name in the article and was subject to the USAO DDC's investigation. The Richmond search warrants. In 2019 and 2020, the FBI obtained 4 warrants authorizing agents to search hard drives, an iCloud account, an iPad, and iPhone belonging to Mr. Richmond, as well as 2 Columbia University email accounts used by Mr. Richmond, collectively referred to as the Richmond warrants. The Richmond warrants were authorized agents to search for and seize information created and or stored between March 1st, 2016 and May 30th, 2017. That constituted evidence of violations of 18 U.S.C. 641, which is the theft and conversion of stolen government property, or the unlawful gathering or transmission of national defense information, NDI. The information seized pursuant to Richmond warrants during the Arctic Haze investigation is at the center of this current dispute between the parties in this case. 2019-2020 searches of the Richmond devices. The record reflects that in 2019 and 2020, the government took modest and, as it turned out, ineffective steps to identify and isolate potentially privileged information contained in the materials. Privileged information, attorney-client privileged information. So this is saying that in 2019 and 2020, the government took what they're calling modest and ineffective steps to make sure they didn't get privileged information that they can't have. For example, the government permitted Columbia University to review the emails seized from Mr. Richmond's Columbia email accounts and withhold private or otherwise sensitive communications. That's weird. The government also provided Mr. Richmond and his counsel with an opportunity to review the materials seized from his devices and to assert a privilege over those materials. So they told Mr. Richmond and his lawyer, hey, if any of these are privileged materials, check them out and we won't take them. Okay. The government claims that the documents and communications identified by Columbia University and Mr. Richmond as privileged were never reviewed as part of Arctic Hayes' investigation. So they went to the college and said, you pick out what is privileged information. They went to Richmond and his lawyer and said, you pick out what is privileged information, and we won't use any of that. Okay? But they didn't include one person in that process. So they went to the university, they went to Richmond and his attorney. Why didn't they go to Comey? If they're doing this and saying is this privileged information, why didn't they go to Comey and his lawyer? However, the government never engaged Mr. Comey in this process, even though it knew that Mr. Richmond was the attorney representing Mr. Comey as of May 9th, 2017. And 3 of the 4 Richmond warrants authorized the government to search Mr. Richmond's devices through May 30th, 2017, 21 days after the attorney-client relationship had been formed. So again, you knew that was his attorney. You knew there was privileged information in there. You gave an opportunity to party 1, and you gave an opportunity to party 2 to identify privileged information, but you left out party 3? For what reason? August 2019, the Office of Inspector General report noted that Mr. Comey informed the Office of Inspector General that the day after his removal or very shortly thereafter, he retained attorney Patrick Fitzgerald, David Kelly, and Daniel Richmond, his lawyer. According to an April 29, 2020 letter from Mr. Richmond's then attorney to the government, produced to the court via ex parte by the defense, the Department of Justice informed Mr. Richmond that the data it obtained from his iCloud account extended to August 13th, 2019, well outside the scope of the warrants. The Department of Justice told Mr. Richmond that it obtained data from his iCloud account all the way through August 13th of 2019. That's well outside the dates of the search warrant. Why are they taking material outside the search warrants that they're authorized to take? Well outside the scope of the warrant and well past the date on which Mr. Richmond was retained as Mr. Comey's attorney. The same letter further states that the Department of Justice informed Mr. Richmond that it had seized data from Mr. Richmond's hard drive that extended to June 10th, 2017. Again, well into the period which Mr. Richmond represented Mr. Comey, despite the warrant imposing a temporal limit of April 30th, 2017. The warrants only went to April 30th of 2017, but they're telling him they took data all the way till June 10th of 2017 from his hard drive and all the way from August 13th of 2019 on his iCloud account. But their search warrant said it had to end by April 30th, 2017. We're talking about years of extra data here. At the time, the Richmond warrants were executed, the government was aware not only that Mr. Richmond represented Mr. Comey, but also that he maintained ongoing attorney-client relationships with other individuals. So maybe Comey's not the only victim here. As the FBI materials regarding his resignation from special government employee status noted his intention to represent a defendant in a federal criminal prosecution. As a result, when the government obtained the first Richmond warrant in 2019, it was clearly foreseeable that Mr. Richmond's devices contained, potentially, privileged communications with numerous third parties, including Mr. Comey. Nevertheless, in 2019 and 2020, the government made a conscious decision to exclude Mr. Comey from the filter process, even though Mr. Comey, as the client, is the privilege holder and not Mr. Richmond. So you couldn't say, well, we told the lawyer. You have to tell the person who holds the privilege, which is the clients, and you have to include them. The government's claim at the November 5th, 2025 hearing that Mr. Richmond, at the time himself the subject of a criminal investigation and represented by a separate counsel, was in a position to effectively assert Mr. Comey's privilege is entirely unreasonable. So the government's saying, well, this guy asserted the privilege for Comey. You can't do that. And especially he was under investigation, had his own representation. You can't do that. Of equal concern is whether the government complied with a fundamental requirement of the Fourth Amendment, complied with the fundamental requirement of the Fourth Amendment and with the plain language of warrants that it may seize only those materials specifically authorized by the court. You cannot have blanket warrants. They always say what they're authorized for, when, from where, to who, whatever. Under long-standing Fourth Amendment precedent, the government may search for and seize only those materials expressly authorized by the terms of a search warrant issued in connection with specific predicate offenses. You can't just go fishing. You're only looking for those materials you can only look at and seize and whatever. You can only search for if they're listed. Skip a bunch of this. This is all other case law. The principle referred to as the Fourth Amendment's particularity requirement is fulfilled when the warrant identifies the items to be seized by their relation to designated crimes and when the description of the items leaves nothing to the discretion of the officer executing the warrant. So that's a direct quote. The item has to be within the warrant, identified in the warrant, with a relation to a crime, and when the description of the item, without reading it, just the description of the item, you can't look into it and then say, oh, that has nothing to do with it. The description of the item leaves nothing to discretion. It literally, we know this has to do with exactly this crime and exactly what we're looking for, okay? Here, the government was permitted to search all of Richmond's materials, but authorized to seize only evidence related to violations of 18 U.S.C. 641, the theft of conversion of stolen government property, and 18 U.S.C. 793, the unlawful gathering or transmission of NDI. Both markedly different offenses than those with which Mr. Comey is currently charged. So even if they would have had the ability to be looking into Comey through this, these have the offenses they were working under have nothing to do with what's currently going on. Comey's not accused of theft or conversion of stolen government property. Comey's not accused of unlawful gathering or transmission of NDI. He's accused of lying to Congress. There is nothing in the record to suggest that the government made any attempt to identify what documents, communications, or other materials seized from Mr. Richmond constituted evidence of violation of 18 U.S.C. 641 and 793. To be clear, ensuring that agents and prosecutors seize only those things which a court has authorized is a critical early step in the execution of any warrants and any element elemental responsibility of all government agents. When the undersigned questioned the assistant United States attorney currently assigned to this case at the November 5th, 2025 hearing as to how and whether a set of materials responsive to the Richmond warrants was identified and separated from non-responsive materials, he simply said he didn't know. So when the judge and Comey's lawyer said, well, how did you separate materials that had to do with this and covered under the warrants from materials that didn't have anything to do with these crimes and weren't covered under the warrants, and keep those separate and not include them to like taint this entire fucking investigation? Well, the assistant attorney, United States attorney, said, I don't know. Following the hearing on November 5th, 2025, the court ordered the government to produce to the defense all materials seized pursuant to the Richmond warrants in whatever form it is currently maintained by 5 p.m. on November 6, 2025. Pursuant to that order, the government provided to the defense the material seized from the Richmond warrants. But, according to the defense, the manner and format in which the government provided the information did not reflect that the government had seized, reviewed, and used only information in the warrants. They're outside. So the whole basis for this investigation is this evidence. And they gathered this evidence well outside the bounds of their warrant. So there's the first gigantic fucking flaw here. This potential failure by the government is even more concerning because the warrant issued on August 27, 2019 specifically directed the government to identify what information was responsive to the warrant and instructed law enforcement personnel to then seal any information that does not fall within the scope of the warrant and not to further review information absent an order of the court. So they were told specifically, if it doesn't fall under this warrant, seal it. And you cannot review it unless the court tells you you can. Doesn't seem like they followed that fucking rule any way, shape, or form. Of course they didn't. This is a fucking witch hunt for Trump. Again, it goes back to that. Every accusation is a confession. How many times has Trump said he's part of a witch hunt? Or a hoax? And now look what they're doing to fucking Comey, who everybody hates. Everybody hates because the stuff he said about Hillary either hurt her in the election or didn't go far enough to arrest her. The left and right hate Comey. Or at least did around the election. The government appears to have conflated its obligation to protect privileged information, an obligation it approached casually, at best in this case, with its duty to seize only those materials authorized by the court. This cavalier attitude towards a basic tenet of the Fourth Amendment and multiple court orders left the government unchecked to rummage through all of the information seized from Mr. Richmond, and apparently, in the government's eyes, to do so again anytime they choose. The Arctic Haze investigation was closed in September of 21 with zero, nada, none, no charges filed. Then the Richmond materials sat dormant with the FBI unit until the summer of 2025 when the Bureau decided to rummage through them again. I wonder why. So it was closed. There were no charges brought at all. And then suddenly in the summer of 2025, the FBI says, let's go through everything again and see what's in there. Wonder why. What changed? Who told them to do that? Oh, Trump on Truth Social? Yeah, that was it. The 2025 search of the Richmond materials as part of the investigation of Mr. Comey. By the summer of 2025, the FBI and the United States Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Virginia had initiated a criminal investigation into Mr. Comey. As part of the investigation, on September 12, 2025, an FBI agent assigned to the director's advisory team was instructed, apparently, with the concurrence of the USAO EDVA, the District Attorney's Office, to review a Blu-ray disc that contained a full Celebrite extraction and reader reports of Mr. Richmond's phone and iPads backups. Inexplicably, the government elected not to seek a new warrant for the 2025 search. So the stuff they went through on Comey, they didn't even have a fucking warrant for. Are you seeing how crazy this Comey case is? This Comey case is going nowhere, dude. This is, she had to do it or Trump was going to fucking make her reverse all her plastic surgery. I don't know. They didn't even get a warrant. The only warrants they had were to investigate Richmond for either the theft of the government stuff and trying to resell it or transmitting NDI. Comey was apparently investigated for lying to Congress. They didn't get a warrant. They didn't talk to anybody. They just took an FBI agent that only reports to Kash Patel and told him, go through all that and find me something on Comey. Warrant? Fuck a warrant. We don't need a warrant. Even though they didn't get a warrant, even though the 2025 investigation was focused on a different person and exploring a fundamental different legal theory and was predicated on an entirely different set of criminal offenses. Different person, different offenses, different theory. If just one of those changes, you have to get a new warrant. All three of them changed. The court recognizes that the problem is MAGA will never concede this argument because they don't understand this. Oh, the FBI just can't look through stuff they see. No. And you don't want that either. You don't want the FBI to be investigating a guy, right, that has a girlfriend that they also pull all her phone records, that has a cousin they also pull all their phone records, that has works with a fucking accountant that they also pull all their records, that happens to be your accountant, and they find out that you didn't pay $500 in taxes you owed through fucking 15 degrees of separation, and now you're in fucking prison. And there was no warrant, no charges, no They just went by person to person to person to person to person until they found something on you. That's not the way it works. Sorry. The court recognizes that a failure to seek a new warrant under these circumstances is highly unusual. It's outright batshit fucking crazy. But the worst the court can say is highly unusual. You don't want to see the judge saying what you did was highly unusual over and over again, which you're going to see here. This is why we don't take a fucking Mar-a-Lago Barbie fucking insurance lawyer and make her a fucking prosecutor. She's never prosecuted. This is her first case she's ever prosecuted ever, was this grand jury. The court also recognizes that seeking a new warrant under these circumstances would have required a fresh legal analysis and likely resulted in some delay. A delay the investigative team could not afford, given the statute of limitations would expire in mere 18 days. No one's been mentioning that, right? The reason this was rushed, the reason Trump was putting pressure on the first attorney before that guy finally quit after so much pressure, the first U.S. attorney, and immediately put Halligan in this weird swap way, even though she's not qualified at all, is because the statute of limitations is running out. 18 more days would have been over. If a new warrant had been sought by the government and issued by the court, the Fourth Amendment would have required to be narrowly tailored, authorizing access only to materials within a limited time frame and relevant to new offenses under the investigation. In addition, Any new warrant would have imposed strict procedural safeguards to ensure privileged information was not reviewed by the prosecution team. As a result, the parameters of the 2025 search would inevitably have had a different and much more narrow scope than the Richmond warrants. Faced with this prospect, the government chose to unilaterally search materials that were 1. Seized 5 years ago, 2. Seized in a separate and since closed investigation, 3. Never reviewed to determine whether the seized information was responsive to the original warrants. So does it have anything to do with the original warrants? We don't know. 4. That they were likely improperly held by the government for a prolonged period of time. They can't even keep this shit around this long. On a case with no charges. 5, that included potentially privileged communications. 6, did so without ever engaging the privilege holders, Mr. Comey. 7, did so without seeking any new judicial authority. All of these 7 things should have been carried out. None of them were. Having decided to forge ahead under these highly unusual circumstances, the FBI agent conducting the September 12th, 2025, again, highly unusual circumstances. The FBI agent conducting the September 12th, 2025 search of the disk containing the information from Mr. Richmond's iPhone and iPad was specifically instructed to seize, quote, conversations between Richmond and Comey. There appeared to be no precautions in place to avoid the collection of this was his attorney. Privileged information. The agent conducted the review and printed the relevant pages, which included multiple conversations involving Mr. Comey and Mr. Richmond. The reviewing agent then transferred the disk and relevant printed pages to a second FBI agent. Sometime between September 12, 2025 and September 25th, 2025, Agent 2 reviewed the newly seized materials and, not surprisingly, identified communications involving Mr. Comey and Mr. Richmond as potentially privileged. So even in their process, an agent said, oh shit, this is probably privileged information, dude. That's his attorney. We can't even look at this. Imagine that. So even an agent stood up to him and said, this is wrong. The government presented this case to the grand jury on September 25th, 2025. The same day, prior to the grand jury presentment, Agent 2 alerted the lead case agent and an attorney with the FBI's Office of General Counsel that evidence obtained in the government's investigation of James Comey may constitute attorney-client privilege or attorney-client confidential information. It is also possible that the agents may have obtained evidence that constitutes attorney work product information. Agent 2 gave Agent 3 and the FBI attorney a limited overview of the privileged communications. Agent 3, rather than remove himself from the investigative team until the taint issue was resolved, proceeded into the grand jury undeterred and testified in support of the pending indictment. So what should have happened here is when Agent 2 comes to Agent 3 and says, this is probably privileged information, this is privileged information, this isn't good, we can't use this, this is work-related, this is confidential information. Agent 3 has a responsibility to stop, to not be part of this case until there's a remedy here, because he knows privileged information now. He didn't. In fact, but you say, Will, there was probably tons of witnesses, right? There was probably tons of witnesses. We just got this one tainted witness. There were probably tons of witnesses. Nope. Agent 3 was the only witness to testify before the grand jury in support of the pending indictment. The only witness they had at the grand jury that testified in favor of this indictment was tainted by this information and refused to recuse himself or herself. How many things have been wrong with this case so far? Like 30? That should have stopped this case in its tracks. But Trump told him to go get Comey. The government's decision to allow an agent who was exposed to potentially privileged information to testify before a grand jury is highly irregular and a radical departure from past DOJ practice. Again, this judge can't come out and say you're a fucking retard and what you did is fucked up. But when they're saying highly unusual, highly irregular, a radical departure from normal practice, that's basically what you're getting here, okay? Only after the government had reviewed the materials seized pursuant to the 2019 and 2020 search warrants, only after FBI agents had personally identified potentially privileged materials, and only after the government obtained an indictment on September 25th, 2025, did it seek the court approval of a filter protocol for materials. So the filter protocol would be like, hey, judge, I think we've probably got some material here that is privileged. We need a third party to come in, or they can look at it and tell us what's privileged or not. But we need some reason, some way to filter out all this material before we do anything else. But they waited after they were told, after they reviewed it, after they got a grand jury indictment. Then they said, oh, wait a second. We may need a filter protocol for materials the FBI had already reviewed. It's too late then. They've already got it. The filter protocol is to keep you from getting it. You say, I need every email from Legend of Pret Zelda. Okay? But Legend knew that I was coming after her, so she's already got a lawyer. When I say I need every email from Legend of Pret Zelda, I know that she's going to email her lawyer at some point. She knew I was coming for her. She's got a lawyer. I know her lawyer. We know this is a thing, right? She's had this lawyer for 10 years, right? There has to be a process in place before I get that material, before I review that material, that keeps me from getting material between her and her lawyer. There also needs to be a process in place if I'm coming after her for child trafficking to Epstein Island, which I know she did. It's only related to child trafficking to Epstein Island. It can't just be random shit that I then use to charge her neighbor or her neighbor's dog walker because I just went from person to person to person. For reasons that remain unclear, the government waited 31 days from September 12th, 2025, the date the FBI began reviewing the materials, and 18 days from September 25th, 2025, the date the FBI informed its Office of General Counsel about having been exposed to privileged materials, before seeking an approval of a filter protocol, finally on October 13th, 2025. They stole this privileged information that they're not even supposed to have and used it against him. 100%. And you can't tell me they didn't, because the FBI agent was tainted, and rather than trying to remedy the situation when he knew and the lawyer representing the FBI, everybody knew, they pushed through anyways. So that tells me that they used privileged information. If they wouldn't have used privileged information, why wouldn't they have went through the protocol to filter it out? Now, the bigger issue. Listen to this bullshit. The court has now reviewed the grand jury transcript, the audio recording of the grand jury proceedings, as well as the exhibits presented to the grand jurors. Only one witness, Agent 3, testified before the grand jury, and only one prosecutor appeared on behalf of the government, Lindsay Halligan. The government's position is that the grand jury materials confirm the baselessness of the defendant's claim that privileged information may have been shared with the grand jury. While it is true that the undersigned did not immediately recognize any overtly privileged communications, it is equally true that the materials seized from the Richmond warrants were the cornerstone of the government's grand jury presentation. The government substantially relied on statements involving Mr. Comey and Mr. Richmond in support of its proposed indictment. Agent 3 referred to these statements in response to multiple questions from the prosecutors and from the grand jurors, and did so shortly after being given a limited overview of privileged communications between the same parties. The government's position that privileged materials were not directly shared with the grand jurors ignores the equally acceptable prospect that privileged materials were used to shape the government's presentation and therefore improperly inform the grand jury deliberations. Once you know something, you can't unknow it. So you say, well, we didn't take this privileged information and give it to the grand jury. No, but the only guy you had testify knew this and cannot unknow it while he was answering questions for the grand jury. Statements of the prosecutor to the grand jury. This is wild. Now, these statements are blacked out, but we can use context clues. You got to work with me. You got to be smarter than the average triple trumper, okay? You can work with me. If you just give me a second to fucking read it, I'm going over the whole thing. It's like a fucking spoiler in the chat. Having been requested by the government to review the grand jury materials, the court has identified two statements by the prosecutor, Lindsay Halligan, to the grand jurors that on their face appear to be fundamental misstatements of the law. She lied about the way the law works. So, if you don't know, a lot of time with the grand jury is explaining how the law works. What's a good example? Hillary Clinton's emails. Hillary Clinton's emails technically violated a portion of the law as written. The problem is intent. And intent is really, really, really fucking hard to explain to somebody. You're like, well, they did violate this law, right? But you have to have the intent to violate this law in a certain way. So a lot of grand jury proceedings is explaining to the grand jury the way the law works, that a reasonable person, like with intent, a reasonable person would have to infer that this person had the intent to do this on purpose. We can't know for sure someone's intent, right? They could just be the biggest airhead in the world and accidentally did this, but it's screaming they did it on purpose. But a reasonable person would infer that they had this intent. So a lot of grand jury stuff is just instructions on how the law works, how it's deciphered, how other courts and judges have ruled on certain aspects of the law, what intent means, what this word means, what that word means, how to violate the law, what constitutes a lie, what constitutes withholding information that they're not allowed to withhold or they could withhold, right? This is part of it. Having been requested by the government to review the grand jury materials, the court has identified two statements by the prosecutor to the grand jurors that on their face appear to be fundamental misstatements of the law that could compromise the integrity of the grand jury process. Both statements by the prosecutor are in response to questions that were asked by the grand jurors and directly related to the communications involving Mr. Comey. So it's not like sidebar questions. It's not that it was directly related to Mr. Comey's statements, communications with his lawyer, and they were asked by the grand jurors. First, after having advised the grand jurors that the prosecutor was their legal advisor, the prosecutor stated blank. The prosecutor's statement that blank is a fundamental and highly prejudicial misstatement of the law that suggests to the grand jury that Mr. Comey does not have a Fifth Amendment right to not testify at trial. So I'm assuming she said something like, I don't know what his intention was, but with an indictment, we'll be able to put him on the stand and make him answer why he did this. But Comey has a Fifth Amendment a right to not testify at a trial. So you can't tell him that. You can't tell him, like, we need these questions answered and we need him to tell us why at his trial. And if we get this indictment, we'll take him to trial. The prosecutor's statement ignores the foundational rule of law that if Mr. Comey exercised his right not to testify, the jury could draw no negative inference from that decision. They may have said something like, why didn't he just say that? Why did he say, why did he refuse to answer? Why did he invoke his Fifth Amendment? Why? Like, that's pretty sketchy, right? No, you're not allowed in any way, shape, or form to use that against them. You're not allowed. If someone pleads a fifth, that cannot be held against them. No negative inference from the decision. It holds that the Fifth Amendment forbids either comment by the prosecution on the accused's silence or instructions by the court that such silence is evidence of guilt. She could have said something like, well, if he was innocent, he would have said this, or he would have told us about it, or he'd done this. There's no telling what she said because she's not a fucking prosecutor. She's an insurance lawyer that Trump thinks looks like a Mar-a-Lago girl. That's it. The prosecution's statement that blank may have reasonably set an expectation in the minds of the grand jurors that rather than the government bear the burden to prove Mr. Comey's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt at trial, the burden shifts to Mr. Comey to explain away the government's evidence. So it sounds like to me that she said something like, he did this, and we don't know why, but we want to indict him so we can ask him, and he'll have to tell us. This almost sounds like an intent question. Did he do it with intent? I don't know. But when we get him on, if we get an indictment, we get him on the stand, we'll make him tell us why. Seems like if he didn't do anything wrong, he'd be more than happy to tell us on the stand why he didn't do anything wrong. Something to that effect, right? They're saying they implied that the burden is on Mr. Comey to explain away the evidence they have. If that's not what this means, then he can come tell us after we indict him, kind of deal, which is crazy. Crazy. Like the Fifth Amendment's a cornerstone. And it says holding that due process clause requires the government to prove a criminal defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. In addition, the statement by the prosecutor was made in response to challenging questions from jurors. Like, this almost sounds like, how do we know he wasn't talking about something else? And she said, we don't. But we can get him on the stand through this grand jury indictment and ask him, and he'll have to tell us. It was a challenging question from the grand jurors. Challenging, like, well, we're not sure that this is about that what he's talking about here is actually that. And she said, we don't. But if we get an indictment, we can force him to tell us on the stand under oath. And if he's got nothing to hide, he's got nothing to hide, right? Right? But they had everything to hide. The context of which suggests the grand jurors may have reasonably understood the prosecutor to mean that if she could not satisfactorily answer the questions, then Mr. Comey would blank have to answer the questions at trial. Again, this is what it says. It suggested to the grand jurors that the prosecutor was saying that if she could not satisfy answers to their questions, like why did he do this? Why did he do that? Well, you can put him on trial and make him answer. That if she could not answer their questions, right? They had a question and she said, I don't know, but we can make him answer us. You cannot do this. 1,000,000,000%, you cannot fucking do this. Then Mr. Comey would have to answer these questions at trial. Took away his Fifth Amendment. In as plain as day. As plain as day. Now, here's the second one. The second, the prosecutor called the grand jury blank, that there was blank. That statement clearly suggested to the grand jury that they did not have to rely on the record, the evidence, the case before them to determine probable cause, but could be assured that the government had more evidence, perhaps even better evidence, that would be presented at trial. So something comes up like, well, does this meet the threshold for what you're claiming here? And the response was, we've got a ton of this evidence. We've got even more that you haven't. How many times have we heard this from people around Trump? We've got even more that you haven't seen. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Just wait till you see the rest of it. They told that to a fucking grand jury. That they alluded to the fact that if they didn't have to use what was presented to determine probable cause, they could be assured the government had more and perhaps better evidence that would be presented at trial. This is an outright lie. Well, if we get this indictment, we'll have a ton of this stuff to bring up. What? That's fucking insane. Well, we'll get discovery. Remember how many times we heard that? Just wait. I dare Dominion to sue me. Then we'll get discovery and we'll get to the bottom of this. These people are fucking insane. And they were going to do anything to get a grand jury to come back on this. And what do we say all the time about grand juries? All the time. Every time. You could get a grand jury indictment on a fucking piece of toast. If the evidence is there. It's so fucking there's no defense. There is zero defense. It's just you and 12 people, and you tell them the story that you want to tell and only show the evidence that supports your case. You don't show their alibis or their excuses or their statements or what you only show the evidence that supports you. It should be super, if a crime has been committed at all, it should be so fucking easy to get a grand jury to return a true bill. They had to lie about their evidence. They had to lie about the rights he had. They had to insinuate that they had better evidence that they just couldn't show him right now, but they would get it at trial. They had to lie to him. They had to steal attorney-client privileged information and use it against them. They had to use a fucking 6-year-old search warrant because they knew they couldn't get a new search warrant to go through materials that should have already been destroyed and they shouldn't have even been hanging on to this long. Now, this issue right here is crazy. It's the last issue we're going over tonight, but it is a doozy. I'll tell you that much. Issues regarding the completeness of the grand jury transcript and audio recording and the manner in which the second indictment was presented to the grand jury. The second indictment, that's weird. Finally, the record is well established that the grand jury was originally presented with a 3-count indictment signed by the prosecutor. The grand jury, however, rejected count 1 of the original indictment and found probable cause as to the 2 remaining counts. So they were presented 3. Charge 1, count 1, they said no. Counts 2 and 3, they said okay. Hope you got that better evidence. At some point, the prosecutor prepared and signed a second indictment that removed count 1 of the original indictment. That's not a thing. That's not a thing. The grand jury is on these indictments, this indictment with these counts. What do you mean you went and prepared a second indictment just in case they said no to count 1? What? Anyways, keep listening. At the return of the indictment, the government presented both the first and the second indictments to the magistrate judge. The first indictment indicated that the grand jury failed to find probable cause as to any counts. Wait a second. You went to court with this indictment. Well, during court, you have this second indictment printed up. And you take the indictment that you actually went to court with and you hand it to the magistrate judge and say, okay, they didn't find probable cause on any of it. But this second indictment that I just whipped up, they found probable cause on all of it. Excuse me? Listen to this. The first indictment, the original indictment, the only indictment that even fucking counts, indicated that the grand jury failed to find probable cause as to any zero counts. Technically, legally speaking, that second indictment doesn't count. There is no indictment against James Comey right now. He's in court. He's facing the court, and there is no legal indictment at all. Then they whipped out this second homemade during lunch break indictment that indicated that the grand jury found probable cause as to 2 counts. Both indictments were fully executed by the grand jury foreperson and the prosecutor. Let me just show you something. So this is what we ended up with. Hold on. You had, uh-oh. So you have, we'll just use IND, indictment number 1. Indictment number 2. And let's put some crimes that we know on here. So we have rape, murder, and fuck, I don't know. Rape, murder, kill. Isn't that a game we used to play? So this one says murder, kill. Okay. Now, these boxes would be was there probable cause or no probable cause, okay? But I'm going to use guilty or not guilty because basically a grand jury is guilty or not guilty to go to court. So this one had rape, murder, kill. And the grand jury signed down here at the bottom, right? Said not guilty, not guilty, not guilty. Signed, filled out all the way. But then over on this one, for the same crime, the same charge, the same everything, they said guilty, guilty. How can these 2 indictments even exist? The two crimes that are on indictment 2 that they said they had probable cause for are also on indictment 1. And as far as the paperwork says, over here on count 2 and 3, they said no probable, no probable cause and signed it. They took the same exact 2 counts, same evidence, same everything, put them here and here, and suddenly on this magic piece of paper, there is suddenly probable cause. How? How? This can't. All Comey has to do is say, we're operating on the basis of indictment 1 is a true indictment, and all 3 of those were no probable cause, signed and executed fully, and we're good to go. This even starts to question double jeopardy. These are the exact same crimes with the exact same information, the exact same evidence, the exact same everything. All they did was erase this one. And over here, the same grand jury at the same exact time, the same signature, the same foreman, the same, within minutes of each other, said no probable cause. Innocent, basically, for our purposes. And over here said probable cause. How? Because Lindsay Halligan's a fucking retard. She didn't want to have to report that we brought 3 counts and we got probable cause on 2. She wanted to report to Trump and the media all the counts had probable cause. Grand jury returned on a true bill on all the counts. So she makes up this secret document. She's fucked herself by lying, stealing evidence, privileged information, everything. But how do you rectify this? Imagine how's a better way to put this? We can simplify it even more. Hold on. Imagine you go to court. Imagine you go to court for a speeding ticket. And it is 50 in a 40. $50 and a 40. Okay. 50 and a 40, 50 and a 40. This happened on January 1st, 2026. This would be a future crime. 2026 at 10:36 a.m. January 1st, 2026. At 10:36 a.m. You were captured by radar by Officer Dickface. Okay. At First and Main. Everything's the exact same. Everything. All the evidence, the radar, the officer, the time, the jury. And for some reason, the jury gives their verdict and they say, not guilty. And then they're asked again immediately afterwards and they say guilty. No new evidence, no new trial, no nothing. How do you reconcile these things? How? The judge says, jury, could you read out the verdict? And they say not guilty on the speeding charge. Everybody cheers. And the judge says, I'm sorry, jury, could you read out the verdict? And they say guilty. Guilty as charged. It's just so insane. I don't know what the fuck they're doing. The judge, the magistrate judge, they were fully executed by the grand jury foreperson. That means the grand jury foreperson filled everything out and signed it, and so did the prosecutor on both of them. One says count 1, 2, and 3, no probable cause. The other one says count 2 and 3, probable cause. Presented with 2 facially inconsistent indictments. One says no probable cause, one says probable cause for the exact same thing. The magistrate judge questioned the grand jury foreperson and the prosecutor to unwind this procedural knot. The magistrate judge then accepted the return of the second signed document, but refused the first one for whatever reason, right? Why'd they turn in 2, you stupid motherfuckers? The second indictment was a new indictment, and therefore the undersigned concluded, after reviewing the grand jury transcript, that the prosecutors would have presented the second indictment to the grand jury for consideration before it was returned to open court. It now appears that may not have happened. As if all this wasn't bad enough, they claim this is the full grand jury process, audio, video, everything. We can't even figure out from the video, audio recording, everything. We can't even figure out when they gave them this secret second indictment. On November 14, 2025, the prosecutor filed a declaration with the court attempting to address the issue of whether the transcript of the grand jury proceedings filed with the court was the full and complete transcript. The prosecutor stated that after the grand jury was left to deliberate on the first indictment at 4:28 p.m., she had no further contact with the grand jury. How? You left the grand jury at 4:30 p.m. with the first indictment, and you had no further contact with the grand jury until 6:40 p.m. when they said that they had returned. How did they get the second indictment? The prosecutor further stated that at approximately 6:40 p.m., she was notified by then First Assistant United States Attorney that the grand jury returned a true bill only on 2 of the 3 counts presented by the government. The prosecutor, according to her declaration, then proceeded to the courtroom for the return of the indictment. The hearing on the return of the indictment began at 6:47 p.m. The very short time span, 6:40 to 6:47, between the moment the prosecutor learned that the grand jury rejected 1 count in the original indictment and the time the prosecutor appeared in the court to return the second indictment could not have been sufficient to draft a second indictment. Where'd you have this motherfucker hid at? So allegedly, what we're supposed to believe is at 6:40 p.m., she was in her office away from the courtroom, and she heard, hey, they just came back, and they're saying no on 1, yes on 2 and 3. 7 minutes later, she gets there for the reading of the indictment. There's not enough time for them to even fucking type out a second indictment. So why did they have this second indictment the whole time? It's almost like they knew. It's almost like they knew there'd be no probable cause on the first count, huh? Where the fuck did the second indictment come from? They didn't even have time to type it up. Where'd it come from? It says the time could not have been sufficient to draft the second indictment, sign the second indictment, present it to the grand jury, provide the legal instructions that you're required by law to give to the grand jury, and give them the opportunity to deliberate and render a decision on the new indictment. And she's been asked multiple times now, are you sure this is all of it? This is all the transcripts. This is all the recording. This is where you were. This is the time you were there. This is when you came back. This is Yep. If the prosecutor is mistaken about the time she received the notification of the grand jury's vote on the original indictment, and this procedure did take place, then the transcript and audio recording provided to the court are incomplete. So the only argument she has here is to say, oh, I'm mistaken. Actually, I came back to the courtroom at 6:30, drafted the indictment, explained the indictment, gave them their instructions, allowed them to deliberate. They only took 10 minutes, allowed them to deliberate on it, and they rendered a decision within those 10 minutes. That's where. Well, then why is that not in the recording? Why is that not on the video? This is a full and complete recording and video, right? So what actually happened is they already had this second indictment ready, just in case. And they just said, well, since you didn't return probable cause on all three, we're just going to have you sign this one that's just got two of them on it. They didn't give them the instructions. They didn't explain to them the changes. They didn't give them time to deliberate. They didn't do fucking anything that they were required by law to do. In fact, the judge says, if this procedure did not take place, the court is in completely uncharted legal territory in that the indictment returned in open court was not the same as the charging document presented to and deliberated upon by the grand jury. I can't give you the indictment, let you go deliberate for 3 fucking hours. You come back and tell me something, I give you another one and say, just sign this one. You didn't deliberate on that one. I didn't give you instructions on that one. I didn't explain it to you. I didn't give you time to talk about it. I didn't give you anything. That's completely, no one has ever done this. It's completely made up bullshit. 100%. The judge says, if this procedure did not take place, the court is in completely uncharted legal territory in that the indictment that was returned in open court was not the same charging document that was presented to and deliberated on by the grand jury. It was a different fucking document. Either way, this unusual series of events, still not fully explained by the prosecutor's declaration, calls into question the presumption of regularity generally associated with grand jury proceedings and provides another genuine issue the defense may raise to challenge the matter in which the government obtained this indictment. The whole case is fucked. From the moment they told some FBI agent, go review these 5-year-old documents that we should have destroyed probably 2 years ago, and we don't care about the scope, just grab it all. If it's with his attorney, we don't care, grab everything. Oh, it's privileged information. We don't give a fuck. From the moment they did that until this, all to keep Trump happy because Trump told them to. They've broken every fucking rule that exists because Trump told them to get Comey. And somebody told them, hey, the statute of limitations is running out. This is so fucking insane, dude. And you might not even like Comey. I don't give a fuck. What if this was your case? And they broke every rule around a grand jury to get an indictment against you. I'd be arguing for you just as well. They broke every fucking rule. The judge says we're in uncharted territory. This has never fucking happened. I've never even heard of people considering this. Authority that may support a defense motion to dismiss. To secure the disclosure of grand jury materials under Rule 6E3E2, a defendant must show that a ground may exist to dismiss the indictment because of a matter that occurred before the grand jury. Not this before doesn't mean previously to the grand jury. It means in front of, like in front of the grand jury. The government argues that the defense has failed to meet its heavy burden to satisfy this standard, and even assuming there was a Fourth Amendment violation or that privileged information was compromised, the most severe remedy available to the defense would be the exclusion of evidence rather than dismissal of the indictment. Indeed, the validity of an indictment is not affected by the character of the evidence considered. Courts have likewise held that grand jury's consideration of evidence obtained in violation of the attorney-client privilege on its own does not constitute grounds for dismissal of an indictment. Holding that a motion to dismiss the indictment based on an alleged violation of attorney-client privilege before the grand jury must be denied, right? So that's not enough by itself. However, the government's claim that this is, at worst, a conventional Fourth Amendment violation and an excusable slippage of privileged communications is unpersuasive, particularly considering the central role this information played in the government's grand jury. So if this happened in Luigi's case, in Luigi, the hero from New York City, they claimed they accidentally saw a email that was between him and his lawyer, and there's remedies for that. But that doesn't throw out the whole case, right? It just doesn't do that. It's very much different to have your only witness briefed on information between the accused and his lawyer, and then immediately go in and be the only person to testify with that information between the accused and his lawyer. It's one thing if Luigi and his lawyer's email gets leaked to one person. If that person is the only fucking witness that's going to do the only testifying in the entire grand jury, and then immediately gets briefed right before they go in on that information, then carries it in there to answer questions about that information, that's bullshit. But whatever. It played a central role in the government's grand jury presentation. It is well established that courts may, and indeed on occasion must, use their supervisory authority to safeguard the integrity of the grand jury process. The Supreme Court has recognized that a district court may use its supervisory power to dismiss an indictment because of misconduct before the grand jury, at least where that misconduct amounts to a violation of one of those few clear rules which were carefully drafted and approved by this court and by Congress to ensure the integrity of the grand jury's functions. So if a court rules that one of the few rules around a grand jury that literally ensures its integrity was violated by the prosecutors, then hell yeah, they can throw out a fucking indictment. Dismiss it across the board. The Supreme Court has also recognized that this supervisory power of federal district courts should be used to implement a remedy for violations of recognized rights to preserve judicial integrity by ensuring that a conviction rests on appropriate considerations validly before the jury, and finally, as a remedy designed to deter illegal conduct by the prosecutors. Accordingly, when prosecutorial misconduct before the grand jury prejudices a defendant and threatens that defendant's right to fundamental fairness in the criminal process, a district court may exercise its supervisory authority to dismiss the indictment. So if he's been prejudiced or threatens his rights to fairness, they can dismiss it. The Supreme Court has held that a defendant who seeks to have an indictment dismissed because of misconduct before the grand jury must show actual prejudice and establish that the violation substantially influenced the grand jury's decision to indict. Or that, now, Comey's lawyer has not seen any of this grand jury stuff. Just the judge has. The court was allowed to review it. And the judge, to me, what the judge is saying is, I think the violations they made fundamentally shaped, it was central to their case. It fundamentally shaped. So if Comey gets access to this, him and his lawyer, and they file a claim and say, yeah, they used illegal tactics to make this case, even when they were asking questions, they lied about my rights. They lied about the evidence they had, saying there's more evidence down the road. They slipped in a secret indictment that we don't even know where the fuck it came from. There wasn't even enough time for them to print it up. Like, yeah, if they file this, I think this judge will dismiss it. 100%. who have an indictment dismissed because of misconduct before the grand jury must show actual prejudice and establish that the violation substantially influenced the grand jury's decision to indict, or that there was a grave doubt that the decision to indict was free from substantial influence of such violations. That's the one. There's a grave doubt. The judge has already said this, right? We're out of the ordinary. We're in uncharted waters. We're all these things. There's a grave doubt that the decision to indict was free of these of influence from these violations, because everything they did was a fucking violation. Here, the procedural and substantive irregularities that occurred before the grand jury and the manner in which evidence presented to the grand jury was collected and used may rise to the level of government misconduct resulting in prejudice to Mr. Comey. Based on the foregoing, the court makes the following findings. First, the facts establish a reasonable basis for the defense to challenge whether the Richmond warrants were executed in a manner consistent with the Fourth Amendment and the orders of the issuing court. Second, the facts establish a reasonable basis for the defense to challenge whether the government exceeded the scope of the Richmond warrants in 2019 and 2020. They absolutely did. Different person, different scope, different time period, different crime, different everything. By seizing and preserving information that was beyond the scope of the warrants, that is, information that did not constitute evidence of violations of 18 U.S.C. 641 or 793. Again, Comey's not accused of these. That was what Richmond was accused of. Third, the facts establish a reasonable basis for the defense to challenge whether the government had the lawful authority to search the Richmond materials again, a brand new time in 2025. Right? We forgot the 5 years on an old search warrant. Fourth, the facts establish a reasonable basis for the defense to challenge whether the government's 2025 seizure of the Richmond materials included information beyond the scope of the original warrant. They did. Fifth, the nature and circumstances surrounding the government's potential violations of the Fourth Amendment and court orders establish a reasonable basis to question whether the government's conduct was willful or in reckless disregard of the law. I hope they start snatching fucking souls and taking fucking bar licenses. Like, I'm fucking done with this. Fifth, I'm sorry, that was the willful disregard of the law. Sixth, the facts provide a reasonable basis for the defense to show that they were prejudiced by the government's use of the Richmond materials in the grand jury, particularly if the government's conduct was willful or reckless, given the centrality of the materials to the government's presentation. Now, again, I'm not saying that the Richmond documents were central to the government's grand jury presentation. The judge is. The judge right here is saying, given the centrality of these privileged materials to the government's presentation. Seventh, the facts establish a reasonable basis for the defense to challenge whether the government took sufficient steps to avoid the collection and review of privileged materials, including the reasons why Mr. Comey was never afforded the opportunity to assert privilege over his communications until after the indictment was obtained. They gave the school, they gave Richmond's lawyer a chance. They didn't give Comey a chance. Eighth, the facts establish a reasonable basis for the defense to challenge whether privileged information was used directly or indirectly by the government to prepare and present its grand jury presentation. This is particularly troublesome because the government's sole witness before the grand jury was exposed to a limited overview of privileged information just before he testified. And you think, well, why did that other agent come in there and give him this overview of what was limited information? Because the correct thing was him to say, oh, I have been exposed. I need to remove myself from this. He didn't. Ninth, the nature and circumstances surrounding the disclosure of potentially privileged information establish a reasonable basis to question whether the government's conduct was willful or in reckless disregard of the law. This is particularly significant because Agent 3, after having been exposed to potentially privileged information, chose to testify before the grand jury rather than separate himself from the investigation to contain any further exposure to privileged information and limit any prejudice to Mr. Comey. 10th, as discussed in the section above, the prosecutors made statements to the grand jurors that could reasonably form the basis for the defenses to challenge whether the grand jury proceedings were infected with constitutional errors. 11th, the grand jury transcript and recording likely do not reflect the full proceedings because, although it is clear that a second indictment was prepared and presented to the grand jury, the transcript and audio recording of the proceedings do not reflect any further communications after the grand jury began deliberating on the first indictment. Collectively, the facts set forth herein and the particularized findings of the court establish that grounds may exist to dismiss the indictment because of a matter that occurred before the grand jury. The court need not now determine whether any facts herein have been proven or whether there is merit to any motion yet to be filed. The task may lie ahead. Rather, the court is finding that the government's actions in this case, whether purposeful, reckless, or negligent, raise genuine issues of misconduct, are inextricably linked to the government's grand jury presentation and deserve to be fully explored by the defense. Balancing grand jury secrecy and disclosure to the defense. Lastly, before ordering disclosure of grand jury materials, the court must balance secrecy requirements against Mr. Comey's due process rights. We talked about that. Traditional policies underlying grand jury secrecy are only moderately applicable to this case. Here, the grand jury's role in this case is over and the statute of limitations has expired, so there is no danger that a release of grand jury materials could impact future grand jury proceedings. It's over. Statute of limitations is over. He's going to win this. He should win this. He deserves to fucking sue him. The only person to testify before the grand jury was a single federal agent. There are no other persons who have information with respect to the commission of crimes who testified before the grand jury, either voluntary or pursuant to subpoena. The government has offered no particularized reason why grand jury materials should be kept from the person the grand jury indicted. Mr. Comey was the only person who is the subject of this grand jury proceeding, and Mr. Comey is the only person who is receiving the grand jury information. On the other hand, as the court has found, these materials are essential if Mr. Comey is to fully and fairly defend himself in the face of the irregularities that have characterized this investigation from its inception, since it was started. It is also important to note that the grand jury materials are not being made public, at least not yet. The grand jury materials are being provided to the defense under the terms of a protective order and for the limited purpose of defending this criminal action brought by the government. For those reasons, the court finds that these institutional concerns for grand jury secrecy are greatly outweighed by Mr. Comey's right to due process. The court recognizes that relief sought by the defense is rarely granted. However, record points to a disturbing pattern of profound investigative missteps that led an FBI agent and a prosecutor to potentially undermine the integrity of the grand jury proceeding. Therefore, in this specific case, the court has before it a rare example of a criminal defendant who can actually make a particularized and factually based showing that grounds exist to support the proposition that irregularities may have occurred in the grand jury proceedings and may justify the dismissal of one or more counts of this indictment. Accordingly, the defense request for all grand jury materials is granted. Now, immediately, the federal government filed an appeal, and they asked for an order. They asked for an order in their appeal to block this at least until the appeal is heard. With what I've read you now, listen, I want you to be very clear. None of this was from the prosecution, and none of this was from the defense. This is from a judge who is supposed to be looking at both sides and giving his opinion on it as the law is read. So does anything I read here, it's not propaganda from either side, does anything I read here make you feel like the government is going to win a fucking appeal? They requested a stay, yes. I don't think there's no way. There's no way. This guy is reading right down the middle. He saw both sides. He hears both arguments. He knows. There's no way they win an appeal. I understand the reason for a stay so another judge can look at it and blah, 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 and make sure that we're not doing this for no reason. But holy fuck. He would give the government until 5 p.m. Eastern Wednesday to file objections to this order and set a 5 p.m. Friday deadline for Comey's attorneys to file a response. Yeah, I don't. It'll probably have oral arguments by next Wednesday. There's no way. There's no way. Everything to do with this grand jury is fucking tainted, is fucked up from the get-go. Left, right, it doesn't matter. Yeah, there's no goddamn way. This is insane. It's like the fucking the monkeys at the circus. I don't know what else to say. This is fucking insane. Handed over by the government, it appears the indictment that Halligan ultimately returned in open court may not have been presented or deliberated by the grand jury. It looks like I don't even know where this second indictment came from, and there's no way that they had time to deliberate on it. There's no fucking way. It just appeared. There is no footage of them saying, okay, we're going to deliberate on the second indictment. Insane. So we got another week of this. Hopefully, obviously Comey didn't do anything. Like, they're using illegal information and tactics and violating his constitutional rights to try to get this. This is a Trump told me to do it, so I'm going to do whatever it takes to do it. Lying to the grand jury. Just fucking insane shit, man. And this is very, very, very rare that the accused gets the grand jury information. Usually it's shrouded in secrecy. No one gets this information. Even if you request it. This is the same reason that Trump tried to put, Trump and Pam Bondi tried to put the Epstein files on these Obama judges that wouldn't release it. They ordered them to release it, and the judges said no. It was because it was grand jury information. They don't release that, right? You have to show like an incredible You can't just say, oh, well, we're not going to release it, so why don't you release it? That's not an overwhelming cause for the good of the public, right? Like, that was all bullshit because we know grand jury information is almost never released, almost always kept secret. But Trump and Pam Bondi knew that was a way to try to take the heat off them for a little bit. I don't know. This is all insane, dude. Insane. All right, guys. That's what they got on Comey. It's 2 a.m. here. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for being here. I don't know who we go after next, but I hope all the cases are this fucked up. Nobody will ever be convicted. He's just trying to kick it down the road. At least he can say during midterms, because this might not be over by then. During midterms, he can say some shit like, oh, we're getting Comey, we're going to lock him up, or whatever the fuck he does. Either way, thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Support the stream if you can at buymeacoffee.com/coldbeer. It's time to pay the bills. I'd greatly appreciate that. Any help paying them, you can do that by buying me a six-pack at buymeacoffee.com/coldbeer. I'll see everybody on the next one. I don't know if it'll be tomorrow, but I'll be back. Whenever I'm back, I'll be back. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for being here. We'll see everybody on the next one. Have a good night.
But I can tell you this about if this douchebag happens to see this particular show, you don't have the fork and balls to call out the people on this planet by name and tell them exactly who they are and tell them the rest of the world who they are. You don't have the fork and balls. You don't have the balls.
Okay, Scott.
Here we go, I think I started some shit.
Oh, yeah, Trump did a 180 now saying, oh, yeah, they should vote to release the files. Either he knows he's going to lock it up by claiming it's under investigation, or they've already removed all the pertinent information that involved him. There's no way he makes a 180 like that without some type of reason. Or maybe he has guarantees from the Senate that they won't take it up, right? Even if the House passes it.
Y'all need Jesus. Praise the Lord, head to the extreme. All these false fucking prophets who profit off of gossip. Worshipping drums, cocking, begging for a throat deposit. Swinging fucking meat hammers like fool in a thong. He's strapped to the shaft, eating his chest like he's King Kong. Starving for attention, I'ma make your gut burst. I'll be your huckleberry, I can quench that thirst. Baby eating lizard people, alien sex. What's next? Trump in a dress, fucking Flynn on his desk.
Yeah, John Thune can just say, we just never bring it up for a vote.
He get fucking superpowers.
Boom, done.
Go, I think I started some shit. Piss them off, it's about to get lit. Get the place in the bets, you know that stage is set. You better buckle up, cause you ain't seen nothing yet. Here we go, I think I started some shit. Piss them off, it's about to get lit. Get the place in the bets, you know.
Something changed in his mentality. Either it's hidden, he knows it won't really be released, or he knows they won't vote on it, or I don't know, something. But he's like, we have nothing to hide. All House Republicans should vote to release the Epstein files. But you just disowned MTG over it. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Myself in orbit strapped to an F-16. High on amphetamine with Trump in between. Put on a light coat of baby oil and saluted the troops. He tapped me on the shoulder and said, this is gonna be it. Whoa, wait. Stop. What? What? I'll get my files. Wait, what are you doing? Stop. Hold on. Fucking stop. Dude, come on. Seriously. This is my mom's an alcoholic. Give me a... Oh, my God. Damn it.